Peter's boat. On display here is a reconstruction of a boat from the shore lake in Tiberias in 1986 when the water suddenly subsided.
Worship of their gods, and tombs for the cult of the dead. The history of ancient Egypt, which spans 30 centuries, can be divided into 5 great periods, subdivided into 30 ruling dynasties. The Old Kingdom was one of the greatest epochs of Egyptian history, and the pyramids built at that time are tangible evidence of the magnificence and power of the times. However, Egypt reached the climax of its political hegemony during the period lasting from about 1500 to 1000 BC. In 500 years, Egypt conquered Palestine and Syria, and the kingdom extended as far as the river Euphrates. The sheer size of the kingdom made it difficult to achieve unity, and there was internecine fighting for dominance. The result was that Egypt was conquered, first by Alexander the Great, and subsequently by Augustus and the Romans. The salient feature of ancient Egypt is undoubtedly religion, which, in addition to art, was one of the strongest and most consistent expressions of Egyptian life and philosophy. Egyptian history is well documented. The inscriptions on temples and tombs and the papyri provide information about one of the greatest civilizations in the ancient world. The highest expression of Egyptian art is its monumental architecture, particularly the temples and pyramids, which are diverse and magnificent, as are the considerable quantities of grave goods discovered, which are displayed in major museums all over the world. Moreover, the scribes of antiquity have written of the care and attention lavished by the Egyptians on their dead. They believed that the soul left the body but could not survive decomposition because of the intimate bond between them. Hence their preoccupation with preserving the bodies of the deceased for as long as possible, using elaborate methods of mummification and storing them in impenetrable tombs. They also believed that the dead continued to require material objects from the life they were leaving behind. Evidence of this can be seen in the richness and variety of grave goods found in the tombs, comprising one or more sarcophagi, personal items belonging to the deceased, and different kinds of personal objects, for example jars, statues, and tools. Archaeologists who study the tombs and the finds have unearthed the history of a civilization which is one of the most fascinating that ever existed. The Egyptian collection belonging to the Vatican was put together by Pope Gregory XVI in 1839, though it was Pius VII who in the early years of his papacy first assembled a collection of Egyptian works. The museum houses statues discovered in and around Rome and some brought from Egypt in Roman times, in addition to Egyptian antiquities purchased by the popes from the late 18th century onwards. There are also imitations made in Italy in the Egyptian style during the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Further acquisitions have been added to the collections over the years. Under Pope Gregory XVI, a well-known Egyptologist called Padre Ungarelli was responsible for the layout of the Museo Egizio in the Vatican, even designing a number of rooms in the Egyptian style. In 1989, the museum was laid out as it appears today.
Statues can be dated between 1st and 2nd centuries AD, and they each represent the Nile. The majestic reclining giant is a symbol of the river god in the classical style. According to some ancient sources, the black marble stands for the color of the mud deposited by the river, which gave Egypt's soil its legendary fertility. On the left of the reclining river god is a fountain statue of an androgynous character spouting water from its mouth. The third statue is kneeling and offering gifts, and symbolizes the fertility of the Nile. Statue of a reclining Nile god, late 1st or 2nd century AD. The three statues can be dated between 1st and 2nd centuries AD, and they each represent the Nile. This colossal statue in black granite is one of the most famous discoveries of the Museo Gregoriano Egizio. It depicts Queen Tuya, whose existence is directly linked to two famous pharaohs of ancient Egypt. In fact, Tuya was the wife of Seti I, 1294 to 1279 BC, and mother of the great pharaoh Ramesses II, 1279 to 1000. torso of an anthropomorphic statue of Apis the bull, 3rd to 2nd century AD. This torso from an anthropomorphic statue of Apis the bull may come from Memphis, where Apis was worshipped. It's an extraordinarily beautiful piece and is made of black stone veined with red. The two cases in this room are largely devoted to a collection of small bronze votive objects made in considerable quantities in Egypt in the 1st millennium BC. There are figurines of sacred animals placed on a small box containing the mummified body of a sacred animal, hawks or snakes, different divinities, and ritual objects, including a censer. To the left is a stele covered in magic spells to cure snake and scorpion bites, with the image of the god Horus triumphant over dangerous and fierce animals. Further on, some more figurines of sacred animals are displayed with votive offerings. Many of these objects are from the Cairo. This room is entirely devoted to objects from the Carlo Grassi collection, which was generously donated to the museum in 1952. Starting on the left, one can see figurines in bronze of Alexandrian divinities, and some made of terracotta. The central case contains a number of Alexandrian bronzes and concludes with household objects and tools. Similar to a great altar, was inspired by Hellenistic models from Magna Graecia. At the bottom is a long inscription recalling the military exploits and the positions of the deceased, who were clearly important. Scipio Barbatus was consul in the year 298 BC and died less than 20 years later. The Scipio sepulchre, from which it comes with other sarcophagi and inscriptions, is discovered in 1614 on the urban stretch of the
This octagonal courtyard contains the garden of the Palazzetto del Belvedere. The courtyard was built in the 16th century by Pope Julius II della Rovere and designed by Bramante as a garden for statuary, some in marble set between the flower beds, fountains and trees, orange, lemon, myrtle and laurel. The garden was a place for culture and pleasure, and demonstrated Julius II's great love for classical antiquities and beautiful objects. In this splendid place, the Pope placed ancient statues from his estate, including the famous Apollo del Belvedere, the Laocoon group, and the superb statue of Venus Felix. The courtyard was originally square and was made octagonal in 1772, when Pope Clement XIV commissioned the new layout from the architect Michelangelo Simonetti. For information about the statues set in the niches of the courtyard, please press the number clearly displayed next to the works.
Front of the sarcophagus was scene of the port of Ostia. The deceased in heroic dressed in the style of the goddess Venus. Both their faces are incomplete. Behind them is a lively scene, probably the port of Ostia, where mythical figures and real people crowd round closely packed buildings. This is the front of a large sarcophagus sculpted in the mid-3rd century AD, which was found complete with both sides about 1770 in the Moruga vineyard outside the Porta Latina. Canova's cabinet, with Perseus, Crubus, and Demoxenos. Following Napoleon's large-scale pillaging, which brought a great number of works of art to Paris in 1798, almost all of them returned in 1815, Pope Pius VII decided to buy these 3 statues from the sculptor Antonio Canova, who had not been offered any positions in the Vatican Museums at that time. This purchase was to compensate for the looting by the French. Sarcophagus with a scene of barbarian prisoners surrendering. This sarcophagus may have belonged to a Roman general from the 2nd century AD and depicts the surrender of a barbarian people, presumably the Sarmati, to the philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius. When it was put on display in the courtyard of the statues of the Vatican, it was thought that the warlike scenes on the sarcophagus could be attributed to the Emperor Trajan, with whose noble figure Pope Julius II was often associated. Statue of Venus Felix. The statue is certainly inspired by that of the Aphrodite of Cnidus, one of the most famous depictions of the Venus by the Greeks, the work of the great Greek sculptor Praxiteles, circa 340 BC. The work is in fact Roman, and in the head some scholars recognize an early portrait of Faustina the Younger, wife of Marcus Aurelius, or of Crispina, wife of Commodus, both of whom lived in the 2nd century AD. Close at hand, in the guise of Eros, who is possibly offering her a mirror, is the portrait of one of her sons. As the inscription testifies, this beautiful Laocoon was a mythical Trojan priest who vehemently opposed letting the famous wooden wished otherwise, and Laocoon and his 2 sons were killed by monstrous sea serpents. After this terrible event, the Trojans brought the horse into the city, which decided their fate. From Pliny the Elder, we know that this work, by the sculptors Agisander and his sons Arthenodorus and Polydorus from Rhodes, was in the palace of the Emperor Titus. This splendid sculptural group, one of the most famous in the Vatican Museums, was discovered near the Sette Sala, in the area of the Domus Aurea, on the Esquiline hill looking towards the Colosseum. Immediately after its discovery, the sculpture was acquired by Julius II, who placed it here in the Belvedere, which was then called the courtyard of the statues. Statue of the Tigris. The missing parts were added with great skill, but the original parts do not point to any clear identification. The only thing that can be recognized with certainty is that a statue of a river was sculpted in the 2nd century AD. In the past, it was thought to be the Tigris, the famous river in Mesopotamia. Right from the early 16th century, it decorated a corner of the courtyard of the statues in the Belvedere. With the sarcophagus below, depicting Amazons in battle, it formed part of a fountain, which was restored and reassembled under Michelangelo's supervision. On that occasion...
Even een fotootje maken. Ja, ik wilde wel... Ja, ik wilde een wegpas.
And now we are about to pass through the room of the animals. It's also called the marble zoo, because when you get inside, you are surrounded by hundreds of species. All of them are beautiful, some of them are inspired by nature, some of them are but I never say that these are yeah, they started from a fragment, but then they have been these statues, all of the statues around you are basically all restored. So today we appreciate many of the things that those were restored, those conceived the original. Sometimes it's not from one land or just a part of the body and then they complete it. But we have 100% of our everywhere else, road like this, special lines, like the higher class, etc. Here we walk, 9 million people walk on it every year, because we have so many things.
Mentioned by Pliny the Elder, who worked for many years in Rome. The sea centaur carries off the Nereid, a minor sea divinity, who quickly resigns herself to her fate. two Amoretti clutch the tail of the Triton. One holds a finger to his lips in a gesture of silence to the beautiful Nereid, while the other cups a hand to his ear to listen to the Nereid's cries. This scene is completed, one imagines, by water gushing from the centre's hooves. This fine group of statuary was found by chance in 1778 in a pozzolana quarry close to the vineyard of Scipione degli Effetti, outside the Porta Latina. After being presented to the pontiff, Statue of Meleager. The hero Meleager's exploits are recounted both by Homer and Hesiod, but there are some different aspects and episodes in their accounts. The most noted version is of Meleager, son of Aeneas, the king of Italy and of Althea, killing the terrible bull wounded by Atalanta, which was terrorizing the neighborhood of Calydon. It's as a hunter that he's depicted in this work, a Roman copy from the mid-2nd century AD, inspired by a Greek original dating back to the 4th century BC, and attributed to the sculptor Scopas. It was bought by Clement XIV in 1770. The statue, made in the 1st century BC in Rome by a Greek sculptor, Apollonius, son of Nestor, does not seem to depict Hercules resting after one of his 12 labors, as it was thought for a long time, but probably another god or Greek hero, perhaps Dionysus immersed in thought, or Ajax, who is contemplating suicide, or even Philoctetes, the famous Greek archer, who was left behind on the island of Lemnos, suffering from a snake bite by the Achaean fleet advancing towards Troy. This damaged work was very well known by the middle of the 15th century. Cycle of the Muses. In 1775, in the so-called Villa of Cassius near Tivoli, a sculpted cycle with 7 muses was found together with a statue of the god Apollo. The muses are the protecting divinities of the arts and sciences. Starting on the left and working clockwise, one can recognize the muse of tragedy, Melpomene, of comedy, Talia, of history, Clio, of mime, Polyphemia, of Inserata. Portrait of Socrates. Socrates was one of the greatest Greek philosophers. He was born and lived in Athens between 469 and 399 BC, and was the founder of a school of innovative thought, but not a single word of his remains, except what is mentioned in Plato's dialogues. This This is a late Hellenistic Roman copy of an original Greek work from the 4th century BC and formed part of the sacred image of Jove. The work was found in the excavations at Otricoli in Umbria around the years 1781 to 1782. This image of the divinity immediately became famous, and even Goethe wanted to have a plaster cast of it at the foot of his bed. In 1798, however, it was one of the many works of art looted by Napoleon, who took it to Paris, where it became a source of artistic inspiration. Giant head of Faustina the Elder. Annia Galeria Faustina, the full name of the wife of the Emperor Antoninus Pius, lived from 105 to 141 AD and was famous for her diplomacy and her beauty. Mosaic from the baths at Otricoli. A superb porphyry basin from the Domus Aurea. The polychrome mosaic was discovered in 1780 in an octagonal room in the baths of Otricoli in Umbria. Once it had been restored, it was used as the floor of the Sala Rotonda, adding a wide border with marine scenes at the sides and a head of Medusa in the center. Among the additions in black and white mosaic, there's also a fragment from another excavation near Sacrofano on the Via Flaminia. The main scene of the Otricoli mosaic is a very common one: marine processions, where Nereids, Tritons and sea animals disport themselves in aquatic dances. On a smaller band, there are pairs of Greek soldiers and centaurs fighting. Standing on the mosaic. The Barberini Hera. This is a statue of a goddess whose identity is uncertain. It is presumed to be a Roman copy from Antonine times of a late Greek Hellenistic original, which in its turn was inspired by a statue dating back to the 5th century BC, perhaps by Agora Critus, a pupil of Phidias. The work has a badly restored right foot and seems to have been designed to be seen from afar and below, perhaps at its beach. Statue of Claudius from Lanuvium. The statue, sculpted around the year 50 AD, depicts Claudius, emperor from 41 to 54 AD, crowned with a garland of leaves and fruit in the divine apparel of Jove. The features are those of the emperor and are very well known, while his semi-naked body is in a heroic pose, with his right arm stretching out and holding a patera, a shallow dish used for pouring libations, and his left arm resting on a pole. The eagle turning towards him. Giant head of Claudius from Otricoli. The head is crowned with the civic wreath of oak leaves, but because of its size and anatomical details, the portrait does not appear to be that of Claudius, emperor between 41 and 50. Amaretti at the wine harvest, with similar ones on the sepulchre, it was previously thought that the tomb of Constantia, the daughter of Constantine, came from a temple dedicated to Bacchus, the Roman god associated with wine. The great porphyry outer case, carved circa 340 AD, shows a theme that was particularly widespread from the Hellenistic period onwards, the wine harvest, whose symbolic value was welcomed in early Christian art. Sarcophagus of St. Helena. The outer covering shows a procession of victorious Roman horsemen above barbarian prisoners on their knees. The subject was certainly chosen for an emperor, perhaps Constantius Chlorus, or more probably his son Constantine. But for reasons unknown to us, the sarcophagus was used for St. Helena, the wife of Constantius Chlorus. The tomb was found inside St. Helena's mausoleum, now called Tor Pignatara, adjacent to the basilica dedicated to Saints Peter and Marcellinus on the Via Labicana, just outside Rome. In 1154,
on the other side.
Sala della Biga. The room of the chariot is named after the monumental chariot on display here. Construction started in 1786. It was long and laborious, completed only 9 years later in 1793. The interior was designed to fit in with the object it had to house, in this case, the chariot. The walls, with their false columns and statues, created an artificial setting, but not without a certain charm. Chariot. Galleria dei Candelabri. In the 15th century, at the time of Popes Pius V and Gregory XIII, this gallery was an open loggia. In 1785, Pius VI had it enclosed, partly to give greater protection to the profane museum of the Apostolic Library, which was below. The gallery was divided into different areas, separated by 6 arches. The architects Michelangelo Simonetti and, after his death, Giuseppe Camporese designed it as you see it today. Between 1883 and 1887, at the time of Pope Leo XIII, the ceiling was frescoed by Ludwig Zeitz and Domenico Torti. It was planned that the gallery should contain small pieces of sculpture that were considered less important than other works on display in the museums. The name Gallery of Miscellanea, by which it was originally known, is evidence of this. About 500 of these small pieces of sculpture are still on display today. It was only towards the end of the 18th century that the gallery was called of the Candelabra, taking its name from the candelabra that stand at the side opening of the arches. The candelabra, of different sizes and from different periods, were recovered from existing buildings or archaeological excavations.
statuette of a Persian on his knees. The Persian is recognizable from the typical headgear and is portrayed in act of offering the wine contained in a heavy crater, which he rests on his shoulders. From a passage in Pausanias, we know that in Athens, there were 3 similar statues supporting a tripod, derived from vertical.
Provided a solemn and spacious room obtained by enclosing a terrace for use as a picture gallery to house works from the pontifical palace. The chiaroscuri on the ceiling celebrate significant moments from the pontificate of this pope in an allegorical manner. About 50 years later, in 1838, Gregory XVI, a pope who greatly encouraged the organization and enrichment of the Vatican collections, ordered that instead of paintings, the gallery should be used to house a series of tapestries, particularly those of the new school made by Peter van Elst in Brussels in the 16th century at the time of Clement VII, after designs by Raphael's school. Previously, commissioned by Pope Leo X, the great painter had prepared designs for tapestries with the stories of the apostles Peter and Paul in the Sistine Chapel. Today, these tapestries, described as being of the old school to distinguish them from these, and also made in the same workshop in Brussels, can be admired in the rooms of the Vatican Picture Gallery. Once the artist had prepared the design on cardboard, the workman wove it with threads of coloured wool and silk, and also in gold and silver thread. To make a tapestry, which was usually very large, it was necessary to have a frame as big as the scene to be depicted. There were many workshops for tapestry weavers in Europe, the most famous being in Flanders, especially in Torres and Brussels. There were also some fine tapestry weavers in Italy. For example, in this gallery, there are some tapestries from the Barberini school in Rome, which was active in the 17th century, and a 16th century tapestry from the school of Vigevano in Lombardy, the work of a certain Maestro Benedetto. Few of the great artists of the past felt it was below their dignity to design tapestries. In the gallery there are 9 tapestries from the new school made in Brussels, 8 from the Barberini workshop, and 2 from Vigevano and Brussels, totaling 19. The tapestries of the new school depict episodes from the Gospels concerning Jesus Christ. The first, on the wall facing the windows, represents the adoration of the shepherds at the crib, followed by the adoration of the Magi, and by the presentation of Jesus at the temple. 3 tapestries depict the slaughter of the innocents, the episode recounted in the Gospels of the evangelist Mark. In the Gospel, it's told that King Herod heard from the Magi, the wise men from the east, of the birth of Jesus, and fearful of this new personage, described by the Magi themselves as King of the Jews, who could usurp his throne, he ordered that all male children under 2 years old in the area of Bethlehem should be killed. The last 3 tapestries recount episodes connected with the resurrection.
Gallery of the Maps. The Gallery of the Maps is a very important document of 16th century geography and cartography. Its name comes from the 40 maps of the Italian regions and the Church's possessions which Pope Gregory XIII had painted between 1580 and 1583. These were based on cartoons drawn by Ignazio Dant, one of the great cosmographers of the time. 32 frescoes measuring 3.2 by 4.3 meters each are painted on the 120-meter-long walls. At the ends are 8 smaller frescoes. The gallery has a barrel vault and is 6 meters wide. It was built between 1578 and 1580 by Ottaviano Mascarino who was also responsible for the Torre dei Venti, or Tower of Winds, which is situated above the northern end of the gallery and can be seen from the gardens. To ensure that the maps were clearly spaced on the walls of the gallery, Dante made the dividing element the Apennines, the mountain range that divides Italy in two, lengthwise. He depicted the western regions on the left-hand wall and the eastern regions on the right-hand wall. At the opposite end of the entrance is a series of regional maps showing ancient and contemporary Italy. Each map has a plan, often in perspective, of the main town in the area. In 1631, on the orders of Urban VIII, the maps were added to and embellished by Luca Holsteinio. Girolamo Muziani and Cesare Nebbia did some of the work and coordinated the work of a large group of painters who also decorated the ceiling with stuccos and a series of 80 episodes from the history of the church and the lives of the saints. These were closely connected with the regions whose maps were painted below. The way the gallery is organized, and particularly the idea of geography describing not only the land itself, but also the peoples and cultures which are dependent on it, is a very modern one. But it also reflects a specifically Christian idea of great respect for the diversity of human traditions and cultures. Just before leaving the gallery, you can see on the right and left respectively the maps of Italia Antica from the Roman period and Italia Nova as it was perceived in the 16th century. You can also see a stylized bee depicted in both frescoes in the middle of the sea, the heraldic symbol of Urban Barberini VIII, also represented above the exit door of the gallery. The King of Poland who defeated the Turks who were threatening Europe. The battle was fought beneath the walls of Vienna in 1683. The event is depicted on an enormous canvas measuring 4.58 by 8.94 meters and is regarded as the masterpiece of the Polish artist Jan Matejko. The painter refused his 80,000 florins fee on condition that the painting was presented to Pope Leo XIII on the 200th anniversary of the Vienna victory on the 12th of September 1883. And this is what happened.
Sala dell'Immacolata. This room proclaims the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, the title the Church gives to the Virgin Mary. Because she became the mother of the Saviour, she was conceived free from all sin. On the wall opposite the window, Pope Pius IX is depicted in St. Peter's Basilica on the 8th of December 1854, proclaiming the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. Between the windows are two allegorical frescoes. The one above depicts the Virgin Mary as the mother of the Church and of all men. The lower fresco shows Rome as a woman, together with a she-wolf. The city is depicted as the most important in the world, because it is the seat of the Pope, who is Christ's visible representative on earth. A picture on the wall by the entrance shows the theologists disputing the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. Opposite, the Pope is inaugurating an altar dedicated to the Virgin. The floor of the room is Roman and comes from the archaeological excavations at Ostia. The richly bound books in the display case in the center of the room contain the text of the dogmatic definition, written in many languages. They are reproductions of the originals, which are now kept in the Apostolic Library. 1578 as an act of homage from various kings, heads of state, bishops, dioceses and cities. The frescoes in this room were painted between 1517 and 1524, based on drawings by Raphael, by his pupils Giulio Romano and Gianfrancesco Penni. Raphael died in 1520, when he was only 37 years old, and when the frescoes had just been started. The room, designed to be used for receptions and official ceremonies, continues the iconography of the previous rooms, whose aim was to celebrate the apotheosis of the Church. The principal scenes narrate the overthrow of paganism and the triumph of Christianity, which was formally recognized by the end. Stanza di Eliodoro. Raphael devoted himself to painting this room, known as the Stanza di Eliodoro, because one of its frescoes depicted Heliodorus from 1512 to 1514. Its themes are very much political ones, with the various scenes containing clear allusions to important historical and political events from the time of Pope Julius II. Above the fireplace is the biblical story of Heliodorus, who was caught stealing from the temple in Jerusalem, and was frightened away by the sudden appearance of 3 angels. In the center, a static area of imposing architecture frames the prophet Amos, who is kneeling in prayer. On the far left, Pope Julius II.
Don't interrupt him.
Stanza della Segnatura. This is the first room decorated by Raphael, and is almost entirely in his own hand. The room was chosen by Julius II as his personal study and library, and was called the Stanza della Segnatura, or signature room, because immediately after the work had been completed, the Pope used it for signing and sealing important documents. The images chosen for the room would undoubtedly have been chosen by a theologian from the papal court under the Pope's direction. The idea was to underline the philosophical vision of the time, Neoplatonism, which sought to unite humanism and Christianity by exalting the 3 historically fundamental human virtues: truth, goodness, and beauty. Facing the entrance door is a large fresco of the Disputation of the Most Blessed Sacrament. This depicts truth, which is understood to mean the revealed truth, in other words, theology. This scene was the first to be painted, and is a strongly centralized composition exalting the Church. Represented above is the Church triumphant. Stanza dell'Incendio di Borgo. This room, known as the Stanza dell'Incendio di Borgo, or the Room of the Great Fire in the Borgo, was the dining room of the papal apartments. In fact, the kitchens were in adjacent rooms. The frescoes show the close involvement of Raphael's colleagues, Giulio Romano and Gianfrancesco Penni, and highlight the fact that Raphael was developing a more independent personal style, though in this case his pupils certainly did not manage to outdo their master. Raphael was involved in other work and only had time to prepare the designs for the room and supervise the painting. In 1514, the Pope showed what a high regard he had for Raphael by appointing him Bramante's successor as architect of St. Paul's and, the following year, as superintendent of the antiquities of Rome. The frescoes of this third room were intended to illustrate Leo X's political plans through episodes in the lives of two saints.
The chapel of Urban VIII. This small building was the private chapel of Urban VIII, a Florentine and a member of the Barberini family, who was pope from 1623 to 1644. His pontificate coincided with the most flourishing period of the Roman Baroque. Its leading exponent was the architect Gian Lorenzo Beni, who designed the famous colonnade in St. Peter's Square. Considered the artist a member of his family and a friend.
Frescoes in the Borgia apartments. The Borgia apartments take their name from the Spanish Pope Rodrigo de Borja y Doms, known as Alexander VI, who lived here from 1492 until his death in 1503. Pietà, Vincent van Gogh. Only after his death on the 29th of July, 1890, 2 days after he'd shot himself with a pistol, did Van Gogh's work become famous enough to exercise a profound influence on 20th century painting. Color, form, and gesture at the highest level of tension and of primal tragic energy. Marino Marini. The relationship between man and nature is the main theme of Marini's poetic expression. The initial harmony is expressed by this version in wood from 1936 to 1937 and evokes classical monumentality as the hero calmly frees the horse.
Let's go down the stairs. So just go down the stairs.
So as you see, paintings of that religious collection at the door, the original mantle and coat of arms of the and Raphael hired to decorate the
This portrait of Giovanni Battista Montini, Pontiff from 1963 to 1978, is placed under the inscription, which commemorates the founders.
Downstairs, steps down, French artist, Matisse, and we enter.
Religious art. On the 23rd of June 1973, Pope Paul VI, who was elected in 1963 and who died in 1978, inaugurated the Vatican Museums collection of modern religious art. The collection consists of more than 500 works signed by 250 artists and is housed in the 55 rooms you are about to visit. The task of setting up a new museum in the limited space available in the Vatican palaces was resolved by taking over a series of rooms previously used as storerooms or apartments and laying out the rooms in such a way as to recall the former residences of the popes, from Nicholas III to Sixtus V. The tour starts from the Raphael rooms in the apartment of the Borgia Pope Alexander VI, which were frescoed by Pinturicchio and his school between 1492 and 1495. The tour ends in the Sistine Chapel, which gives a historical dimension to modern art. The opening of the collection set the seal on an event which took place in the Sistine Chapel on the 7th of May 1964. During a meeting this hall was used for displaying Byzantine icons and ancient paintings. Leo XIII and Pius X used it to hold the presents sent to the Pope by the faithful from all over the world. For this reason, it was also called the Hall of the Addresses. Today, it is simply called the Hall of Gifts. In the display cases are Roman and early Christian glass objects, besides furnishings and devotional objects in enamel, ivory and precious metals, dating from medieval times to the present. For some objects, by selecting the corresponding number, you can hear a more detailed description. Built in 1611 under Paul V, the ceiling was decorated by Guido Reni with scenes from the life of Samson, the biblical hero who helped defeat the Philistines, who were the traditional enemies of the Hebrew people. The room is also known as the Room of the Aldobrandini wedding, because of the presence of frescoes of the same name. Fresco of the Aldobrandini wedding, Augustan period. This is a Roman fresco from the Augustan period, found in 1604 in a building on the Esquiline, whose name derives from its subject and the name of its first owner, Cardinal Pietro Aldobrandini. In 1818, Pius VII succeeded in keeping the painting which Napoleon had vainly tried to obtain some years before. It's not easy to decipher the painting in detail, as only this fragment has survived of what must have been a large wall decoration. The young...
Io nel frattempo l'avevo portata a Roma. Quando tu sei la data così la distingue a Roma è stata l'ultima. Ti ringrazio.
Bust of Alexander VII, Melchiorre Caffaro. The bust of Alexander VII, as Pope from 1665 to 1667, is the work of Melchiorre Caffaro, a sculptor of Maltese origin who lived in Rome during the period of its greatest Museo Sacro. In 1576, Benedict XIV arranged for early Christian antiquities to be collected and kept here. What is interesting is the large collection of terracotta objects, many of which are small oil lamps, often marked with Christian symbols. The flame, or better still light, in Christian symbolism is Christ himself, who dispels the darkness of error. In the first display case down on the left is a small image. It is a mosaic dating back to about the 14th century and is unusual, apart from its iconographical elements, because of the way in which it was made. The minute tesserae of which it is composed are held together by a piece of wax. Because of its small size and pleasing character, it was certainly made for personal devotion for journeys. The saintly celebrates every 25 years. The first Pope to open was Vatican.
I don't know. Let me walk here.
Ya, kidding, hindi ki. Ay, ini udah kan. Sekarang pada testing shop.
toni ripieno e i ginocchi al forno.
The building housing the Museo Gregoriano Profano was the last to be built at the Vatican Museums, and it was opened to the public on 15th of June 1970 during Paul VI's pontificate. The museum was named after Pope Gregory XVI, who collected items from excavations in 1844 on the Papal States lands and housed them in the former residence of the popes in the Lateran Palace. The present collection was laid out by George Daltrop and is divided into 5 sections, with an extra section for the lapidarium, which includes items from Jewish catacombs dated 1st to the 3rd century AD, discovered in 1602 in the Monteverdi district. Objects from ancient Rome and fragments of original Greek sculptures are exhibited in a large display area with diffused lighting and can be admired from several angles. The order the works are displayed in is not chronological, but follows a didactic interpretation. The mission of the Vatican collections is to seek beauty in all art forms, including pre-Christian art, as art in itself is deemed a gift of God.
Giant statue of Poseidon. The powerful Greek god of the sea, Poseidon, the Roman Neptune, is depicted here with flowing locks as he leans down, resting his foot on the prow of a ship. Alongside him is a dolphin, with its tail raised as a support. This clue suggests that it was originally in a high place. This is a Roman copy from the Antonine age of an original. Mosaic of the Saratoga. The subject represented is a realistic depiction of an unswept floor after an abundant and rich banquet. Clearly visible are the remains of chickens, fish, seafood and other food. A mouse is shown looking for food. The mosaic, as can be deduced from the signature, is the work of a certain Heraclitus, but the original and the Pleiades. This is a commemorative relief of a victory achieved in a drama which depicts a scene from the myth of Medea. The vindictive witch convinced the daughters of King Peleus that he would have his youth restored if they were to cut him into pieces and boil him in a special potion. However, the king died in the cauldron, and the Pleiades unwittingly marked themselves with this atrocious patricide. This is a Neo-Attic copy from the 1st century BC, the 5th century original. Statue of Sophocles. The person depicted here is Sophocles, the Greek Athenian tragic poet who lived in the 5th century BC, and who, because of his merits, also held important political offices. The statue is a Roman copy of a bronze, which was originally kept in the Theatre of Dionysus in Athens. Athena and Marsyas. Myth has it that the satyr Marsyas invented the flute, or at least picked it up when Athena threw it away, because she felt ridiculous playing it with her cheeks puffed out. Following this, Marsyas dared to challenge Apollo to a musical competition, and because of this, he was flayed alive. Pliny the Elder attributes the work to Myron, the great Attic artist, from the mid-5th century BC, and Pausanias specifies that it was sited on the Acropolis. The group was reassembled here, comprising a statue of the satyr Marsyas, found in 1823 in Via dei Quattro Cantoni on the Esquiline, and the cast of a headless statue of Athena displayed alongside. It is thought to be a marble copy of the well-known bronze of Athena and Marsyas by
Sarcophagus. Between the arches in the centre is a clean-shaven Christ, telling Peter on the left of his triple denial. But the apostle does not believe him. On the sides are 5 other apostles whose heads have been added in plaster. On the imposts of the arches are 8 busts of saints. The sarcophagus, mid-4th century AD, was found in 1841 in the Vatican Acropolis, with that of Agapenia Crescentianus. Sarcophagus of Agapeni and Crescentianus. The sarcophagus, from the 4th century AD, was originally dedicated to Agapeni, who was married to Crescentianus for 55 years. Her husband, who died at the age of 101, was buried beside her. Between the columns, from the left, are Abraham stopped before sacrificing Isaac, Moses receiving the tablets of the law, Christ healing the blind man, foretelling Peter's triple denial. The dead spouses are inside the clippings. Above from the left are Christ multiplying the bread and foretelling Peter his triple denial, Moses receiving the tablets of the law from the hand of God, Abraham halted as he's about to sacrifice his son Isaac, Christ healing the blind man. Front of a sarcophagus with biblical scenes. In the centre is a married couple whose features were extensively reworked in the 18th century. Above from the left are Christ's entry into Jerusalem, God distributing work to Adam and Eve, Moses receiving the law from God, Abraham who is stopped as he is about to sacrifice Isaac, Christ raising the son of the widow of Nain and multiplying the loaves. Below from the left are Moses performing the miracle of the fountain. front of a sarcophagus with spouses in a shell and biblical scenes. In the centre, the spouses were reworked and completed in the 18th century, like most of the upper part. On the upper register from the left are the raising of Lazarus, the multiplication of the loaves, the sacrifice of Isaac, the healing of the blind man, Peter's denial, God giving work to Adam and Eve. On the lower register from the left are Moses loosening his shoes before climbing the mountain, Christ healing the woman with the issue of blood and the miracle of Cana, Jonas thrown into the sea and sleeping under a castor oil tree, Daniel and the lions, Peter's arrest, and Moses striking the rock which gushes water. The sarcophagus dates back to the mid-4th century AD, and it comes from the cemetery of St. Calixto on the Appian Way, near the church of St. Sebastian. Plaster cast of the great sarcophagus of St. Ambrose. The original is under the pulpit of the Basilica of St. Ambrose. (380 to 362 BC). These two lions in black granite are very famous. They come from a city on the western delta and were sculpted for Pharaoh Nectanebo I of the 30th dynasty, 380 to 362 BC, whose statue stands in the Musei here at the Vatican. They were taken to Rome, possibly during the reign of Domitian, who was emperor from 81 to 96 AD, and used to decorate the temple of Isis at the Campo Marzio in Rome.
Architect Donato Bramonte designed the new St. Peter's on a central plan, and in the early 16th century he designed and started to build this long corridor linking the Palazzo Apostolico and the Palazzetto del Belvedere, at that time the Pope's summer residence. In 1806, Antonio Canova, the renowned Italian sculptor, was commissioned by Pius VII, the Chiaramonti Pope after whom the museum was named, to lay it out. Canova was appointed Inspector General of Fine Arts in 1802, and he also helped to organize the restoration of the Roman art collections after the Napoleonic invasions. The gallery is divided into sections, identified by Roman numerals, with the odd numbers on the left and the even on the right. Almost 1,000 classical sculptures of every style and quality are housed here. Statues of divinities and busts, monuments and reliefs, urns and sarcophagi.
Of Heracles and Telephus. Heracles, the Roman Hercules, is depicted here as a loving father with his son Telephus in his arms. But the event, recounted in many poems, epics and tragedies, has a dramatic tinge on many occasions. Statue of Venus with portrait of Julia Sumia. This beautiful statue was found during the 1778 excavations in the ancient Forum of Praeneste, the modern Palestrina. For a long time it was wrongly assumed that the features were those of Julia Sumia, the mother of the Emperor Heliogabalus. The Cinerarium of Zetus. The square block of marble with 8 carved niches was designed to hold the urns containing the ashes of the deceased members of the family. In fact, from the 1st century BC until the middle of the 2nd century AD, cremation was much more widespread than burial. At the sides of the funeral remains were seen. Giant head of Athena. This imposing head of Athena, the warlike Greek goddess of wisdom venerated in Rome as Minerva, is a Roman copy from the 2nd century AD. The Greek original dates back to the early classical age, shortly after 450 BC, and was clearly influenced by the art of Phidias.
Allora, definitely. Allora, we are in the new the name of the group by Joseph. Okay. That was completely okay. And
Caryatid. The caryatid is a replica of one of the caryatids of the Erechteum on the Acropolis in Athens, the missing head of which was sculpted and set in place by the Danish sculptor Bertel Thornes in the early 19th century. The caryatids were sculptured about the year 416 BC to serve as pillars for the loggia of the Korai on the Erechteum, probably by the workshop. Statue of Domitian wearing armor. This seems to be a statue of Nero, which was reworked towards the end of the 1st century AD. The head of Domitian does not seem to belong to the statue, even if chronologically the two elements appear to be contemporary. The emperor's face seems to conceal the original features of Nero. error, probably erased by skillful reworking. Statue of the Dodiphoros. The statue of the Dodiphoros, the spear-bearer, is a Roman copy from the early imperial age of the well-known bronze by the Greek artist Polykleitos, sculpted about 440 BC. In the Dodiphoros, Polykleitos puts theory into practice. The young hero, perhaps Achilles, is in a natural pose in perfect equilibrium. On the supporting leg,
Braccio Nuovo. According to the classical taste of the 18th and 19th centuries, ancient works of art should be exhibited in surroundings echoing their times. A good example of this principle can be found in the Braccio Nuovo, designed by Raphael Stern in 1806 and finished by Pasquale Belli in 1822. Napoleon ordered the removal of many works from the Vatican, some of which were handed back in 1816 by the new French rulers. The Braccio Nuovo was designed to house and display them. The statues are set in niches and alternate with busts placed on marble pedestals. Above them runs a stucco frieze by Max Laboureur, who faithfully copied classical forms in theme and composition. These objects are lit from above.
statue of athlete with head of Lucius Verus. This is a curious pastiche of a portrait head of the Emperor Lucius Verus from the second half of the 2nd century AD, and the body of a naked athlete, a Roman copy inspired perhaps by the work of Myron, the famous Greek sculptor active in the first half of the 5th century BC. Typical of the canons of severe art are the sinewy muscle and abundant anatomical details. Statue of Resting Satyr. The statue of a resting satyr is copied from a work attributed to Praxiteles, the great Athenian sculptor of the 4th century BC. The sensuality of the body and the contrast between the rustic nature of the satyr and his ephebic expression give the sculpture great poise, and it was very suitable for the decoration of villas and gardens. Statue of Aesculapius. Aesculapius, the Greek Asclepius, is the divinity of medicine whose health cult became popular only much later on, especially from the 3rd century BC. The god, contrary to his most common depictions, does not have a beard, but is easily recognized by his typical attribute, the staff entwined by a serpent. This particular version of Aesculapius is thought to be a Roman copy from the 2nd century AD, after a Greek original from the 4th century BC. It was found in 1874 in the garden of the Barbary nuns on the Quirinal. Statue of Prima Porta, Augustus. The Emperor Augustus is depicted addressing the soldiers, which is why he is in military dress. Particularly interesting is his breastplate, on which bears an allegory of the emperor's military virtues, with the commemoration of the restitution in the year 20 BC of the Roman standards lost to the Parthians by Crassus in the year 53. The scene takes place amidst a complex series of historical characters, personifications, and divinities. Beside Augustus' leg is a cherub riding a dolphin, an obvious allusion to Venus, the goddess protector of the gens Julia, the family of Augustus. This very famous portrayal of the Emperor Augustus was discovered in 1863 in the portico of the villa of Livia, his wife, on the Via Flaminia, in the present-day suburb of Prima Porta. Statuary group of Silenus and Dionysus. The work depicts the Greek god Dionysus, god of wine and intoxication, as a child in the arms of Silenus, the divinity of the woods, who had an unpleasant appearance, but was endowed with great wisdom and therefore was ordered by Zeus to be the tutor of the infant god.
Galleria Lapidaria. You are now entering the Galleria Lapidaria. The collection housed here is one of the most important and richest in the world, comprising about 3,500 inscriptions from Christian and pagan sepulchres. This gallery was called...
replica from the Regolini Galassi tomb. A formal fibula with a disc-shaped staff. The fibula corresponds to the modern safety pin, but in this case it is a jewel. It comes from the princely grave goods found in the room at the bottom of the Regolini Galassi tomb in Cerveteri. In gold leaf, it is decorated with embossed work, granulation, and fully rounded figurines. Todi Mars. The Todi Mars is the votive statue depicting a standing warrior resting his left hand on a long iron staff, now lost, while he holds out a patera in his right hand. It depicts the ceremony of making offerings to the gods before setting out for war. The young warrior is wearing a breastplate from which small mobile pendants hang. On the one in the middle is an inscription which describes the statue as being a votive offering from Ehal Trutitis, a name of Celtic origin. Sarcophagus with sagas of Atridae and Thebes. This is a sarcophagus from Lenfro, with a cover on which the deceased is reclining with a volume in his hand. This was a roll of perishable material wrapped round a wooden cylinder and used for reading. It was like a modern book. When it is found in funerary art, it usually consists only of a eulogy of the deceased. The case, decorated with reliefs on all four sides, has some episodes from the lives of the Greek heroes Agamemnon and Menelaus on the front, and scenes referring to the attempt to conquer the city of Thebes on the back. Both episodes are part of
5 anni di vita, attualmente ho avuto un po'.
the apartments of St. Pius V. As you can see, these apartments are relatively small, which says a great deal about the Pope who lived here, St. Pius V, who governed the church from 1566 to 1572. Pius worked hard to implement the reforms made by the Council of Trent and promoted the setting up of the Holy League, which, together with Venice, Genoa and Spain, was intended to halt the advancing Turks, who were threatening Italy from the Mediterranean. On the 7th of October 1571, despite its unequal strength, the League's fleet defeated the Ottoman Empire's navy at the Battle of Lepanto. The Pope saw the victory as a sign of the Virgin Mary's special protection. The apartments consist of a gallery, 3 rooms covering the same area as the current gallery.
Dani.
Ambrose in Milan. Against a background of the heavenly Jerusalem are Christ and the 12 apostles. On the right side, Elias ascending into heaven before Elisha, Noah facing the ark, and Adam and Eve. On the left side are Abraham about to sacrifice Isaac and 4 apostles. The scene of Christ among the apostles reappears on the back. On the cover, there is a Clypius with a married couple on whose left are 3 Jews refusing to adore the bust of Nebuchadnezzar. Or, perhaps... front of a double register sarcophagus with spouses in a shell. In the center is the couple of deceased spouses, with their features reworked in modern times. On the upper left are the raising of Lazarus, the denial of Peter, Christ healing the blind man, Moses receiving the law from God, the divine hand staying Abraham as he is about to sacrifice his son Isaac, Christ raising the son of the widow of Nain, and Christ between Peter and Paul. Below, on the left, are Moses striking the rock from which water gushes, the seizure of Peter, Christ performing the miracle at the marriage feast of Cana, and healing the woman with the issue of blood, Daniel in the lion's den with the prophet Habakkuk, Christ multiplying the loaves and healing the paralytic. The front of the sarcophagus is from the early 4th century AD. It comes from the cemetery of St. Calixtus on the Via Appia, in the area close to the church of St. Sebastian. variety of the theological subjects depicted. Above, from the left, are the Divine Trinity creating Adam and Eve, Christ handing them the ears of corn and a sheep, symbols of toil, the miracle of the wedding feast at Cana, the multiplication of the bread, and the raising of Lazarus. In the center is a Clypeus with a deceased couple whose features are unfinished. On the lower register, from the left, are the scene of the crib, the healing of the blind man, Daniel in the lion's den, Christ preaching to Peter and the latter's triple denial, Peter's arrest, and the miracle of Moses' fountain. The sarcophagus from the first half of the 4th century AD is of great importance, particularly because of the presence of the Divine Trinity in the first episode. It was found in 1838 in the foundations of the baldachin of the Basilica of St. Paul's outside the walls. Statue of the Justiniani Athena. This is one of the most admired versions of the goddess, Minerva to the Romans, which both Goethe and Canova considered a sublime Greek work, which is actually a Roman copy from the second half of the 2nd century AD, after an original Greek bronze from the 4th century BC. Statue of the Nile. In accordance with typically Hellenistic taste, the Egyptian river is surrounded by cheerful putti, who are playing with its natural attributes. The cornucopia, or horn-shaped receptacle overflowing with grasses and flowers and filled with fruit symbolizing abundance. The Sphinx, ears of corn, otter and crocodile. The Nile is a work from the Flavian period, inspired by Hellenistic work. This is probably the statue found in 1513 near the church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, in the ancient area of the sanctuary of Isis and Serapis, in the Campo Marzio. In 1512, in the same place, a statue of the Tiber was found, and both of them statue of the Colonna Artemis. Artemis, the Roman Diana, strides forward in her role as a huntress, with her arrows in their quiver behind her shoulder and the bow in her hands, moving in deep space, which shows the new style of imminent Hellenism. This Roman copy from the 2nd century AD was inspired by a Greek statue from the late Classical Age, sculpted by an unknown Attic master, circa 330 BC. Formerly, it was part of the decoration of the Villa Doria. statue of a wounded Amazon after Polyclitus. This is a Roman copy after a very famous Greek bronze of an Amazon attributed to the Greek sculptor Polyclitus. According to a passage in Pliny, legend has it that with this work Polyclitus won a competition between 440 and 437 BC, organized by the sanctuary of Artemis at Ephesus for the great sculptors Phidias, Polyclitus, Cresilas, and Phradmon. The subject of the wounded Amazon was executed in a similar way by all four artists. The Roman copy of the one attributed to Cresilas is number 67, which stands. Statue of Titus. The statue depicts the emperor in the act of haranguing the crowd. He is dressed in a toga, the typical dress of the Roman citizens whom he is addressing. Titus, with a jovial and rubicund face, was much loved by the Roman people, but destiny kept him on his throne for only 2 years, from 79 until 81 BC. The work was found in 1828 under the Basilica of St. John Lateran, with a statue called Julia Titi, which is also on display in the Braccio Nuovo, just opposite. Statue of Pulisinzi. This female statue, adorned with a diadem and heavily draped and veiled, was in the past identified as the personification of modesty, on the basis of her pose. More recent and plausible theories, including one which is given much credit, suggest she is Mnemosyne, the mother of the Muses, copied in the second half of the 1st century AD from a Hellenistic version dating back to the 3rd century BC, late 2nd century.